My parents ignored 17 calls while I was dying, but a complete stranger saved my life and exposed everything they tried to hide. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Bryn Hale, and the night I almost died was the same night I realized I never really had a family. That evening started like any other. I had just come back from work, tired but relieved to finally sit down. My apartment was quiet, almost too quiet. I remember thinking how strange it felt that no one ever checked on me, but I brushed it off like I always did. I had learned not to expect much. Then the pain hit me out of nowhere. It wasn't normal. It felt sharp and deep, like something inside me was tearing apart. I tried to stand up, but my legs felt weak. My breathing became uneven, and I started to panic. I reached for my phone, hoping to hear a familiar voice, someone who would tell me I'd be okay. Each second felt heavier than the last. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The room started spinning, and I couldn't focus on anything clearly. I remember calling out, even though no one was there to hear me. The silence around me felt louder than any noise. I kept thinking, this can't be how it ends. Not like this. Not alone. I tried to stay awake, forcing my eyes open, fighting the darkness creeping in. Every breath felt like a struggle, like I had to remind my body to keep going. In that moment, lying on the cold floor, I realized something I had avoided my whole life. When it truly mattered, I had no one to rely on. Growing up, I learned early that attention in our house was not shared equally. My brother Ben always came first. His achievements were celebrated, his mistakes were forgiven, and his needs were met without question. I stood nearby, clapping, smiling, pretending it didn't hurt. Over time, I stopped expecting praise or even simple acknowledgement. I became independent out of necessity. While other students relied on their families, I figured things out on my own. I balanced classes with long work hours, often coming home exhausted but still pushing myself to keep going. I told myself it would be worth it someday, that maybe if I worked hard enough, they would finally see me. Visits home felt more like obligations than comfort. Conversations were short, often centered around Ven's life, his plans, his future. If I spoke, it usually went unnoticed or was quickly brushed aside. I stopped sharing details about my own struggles because no one seemed interested in hearing them. That evening, nothing felt unusual at first. I unlocked my door, stepped into my small space, and dropped my bag near the couch. The quiet wrapped around me like it always did. It wasn't peaceful, it was empty. Still, I was used to it. I heated up some leftovers, sat down, and tried to relax after a long day. There was a strange feeling in the air, though. I couldn't explain it. Maybe it was just exhaustion, or maybe it was something deeper I hadn't noticed yet. I remember glancing at my phone, thinking about calling someone, but I didn't. There never seemed to be a point. I had built a life where I handled everything alone. That night, I thought it would be no different. I had no idea how quickly everything was about to fall apart. The pain didn't build slowly, it slammed into me without warning. One second I was sitting, the next I was bent over, gripping my chest like it might stop my heart from giving out. My breath came in short, uneven gasps, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pull in enough air. It felt like something heavy was pressing down on me, trapping me in place. My fingers went numb, but I forced myself to reach for my phone. It slipped once before I managed to hold on to it. I unlocked it with shaking hands, my vision already starting to blur at the edges. I didn't think, I just acted. I hit call, hoping someone would answer, hoping I wouldn't have to go through it alone. The ringing felt endless. Each second stretched out, making my panic worse. When the call ended, I tried again. And again. I kept pressing redial like it could somehow change the outcome. My chest tightened more with every failed attempt, and fear settled deep inside me. I typed a message, struggling to focus on the screen. The words came out messy, but clear enough. I needed help. I needed someone to hear me. After sending it, I stared at the phone, waiting for it to light up, for any sign that I wasn't alone. Nothing came. The room felt colder as I slid down from the couch to the floor. My body was getting weaker, and it scared me how fast it was happening. I tried to stay awake, tried to keep my eyes open, but everything was fading in and out. All I could think was how quiet everything had become. No footsteps, no voices, no help coming. Just me, lying there, hoping something would change before it was too late. I forced myself to try again, even though my strength was fading. My chest burned, and every small movement felt like too much. I scrolled through my contacts and tapped my dad's number, hoping maybe he would pick up. The call didn't even ring properly, it went straight to voicemail. That sharp beep at the end felt louder than anything else in the room. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I moved to the next name. My brother. For a second, I held on to a small bit of hope. Maybe he would answer. Maybe he would understand that something was seriously wrong. The phone rang once, then the call was cut off. Not missed. Not ignored by accident. It was rejected. That moment hit harder than the pain in my chest. My hand dropped to the floor, the phone still loosely held between my fingers. I stared at the ceiling, but everything looked blurry, like I was drifting away from it. My thoughts slowed, but one idea stayed clear. They had the chance to answer. They chose not to. A heavy feeling settled inside me, deeper than fear. It wasn't panic anymore. It was something colder, something final. I stopped expecting the phone to ring back. I stopped hoping for a message. The silence wasn't surprising anymore, it just felt real. My body felt weak, like it was giving up piece by piece. I could barely move, barely think, but that realization stayed strong. When everything was falling apart, when I needed someone the most, I didn't matter enough for them to pick up. I lay there, too tired to fight it, understanding something I had avoided for years. This wasn't new. It was just the first time I couldn't ignore it. I don't know how long I was lying there, but the silence suddenly broke with a sharp knock on my door. At first, I thought I imagined it. Then it came again, louder this time, followed by a voice calling out, asking if everything was okay. I tried to respond, but my voice came out weak, barely more than a whisper. A few seconds later, the door opened. I must have left it unlocked. Footsteps moved quickly inside, and then someone was beside me. He said my name like he wasn't sure, like he had only heard it once before. I managed to turn my head slightly and saw my neighbor, Cade. We had only exchanged a few short greetings before, nothing more. His face changed the moment he saw me. He didn't hesitate or ask too many questions. He pulled out his phone and spoke clearly, giving details I couldn't even process. His voice stayed steady, even though everything around me felt like it was falling apart. He moved carefully, making sure I was on my side, telling me to keep breathing, to stay awake. I could hear him talking, but my focus kept slipping. Still, something about his tone made it easier to hold on. It wasn't rushed or panicked. It was calm, like he was making sure I didn't feel alone. Time felt strange after that. I remember flashes, his hand keeping mine steady, his voice repeating simple words, telling me help was on the way. I held on to that. For the first time that night, I wasn't completely alone on the floor. Someone had noticed. Someone had come. And that made all the difference. When I opened my eyes, everything felt distant and slow. The bright lights above me made it hard to focus. For a moment, I didn't understand where I was. Then the steady sound of machines and the faint smell of medicine made it clear. I was in a hospital bed, still weak but breathing easier than before. I turned my head slightly and saw someone sitting nearby. Cade was there, quiet, not saying much, just making sure I was okay. He looked relieved when he noticed I was awake. He didn't ask too many questions. He just told me I was safe now. As time passed, I became more aware of everything around me. Nurses came in and out, checking on me, adjusting things, speaking in calm voices. But there was something missing. No familiar faces. No worried voices asking how I felt. No one from my family walked through that door. I kept glancing at my phone, expecting something, anything. A missed call, a message, a sign that they cared enough to check. Hours went by, then more. The silence stretched longer than I thought possible. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was empty and cold. Kate stayed for a while, then stepped out to give me space. I was alone again, but this time it felt different. I wasn't scared like before. Just aware. At some point, my phone finally lit up. I picked it up slowly, my hand still a little unsteady. It was a message. I opened it, hoping for concern, maybe even a small apology. Instead, the words were short and distant. No urgency, no worry behind them. Just a simple excuse and a casual line, as if nothing serious had happened. I stared at the screen for a long moment, letting it sink in. That message said everything without actually saying much at all. Cade didn't say it right away. He looked unsure, like he was debating whether I was ready to hear it. I could tell something was bothering him, something he had been holding back since that night. After a long pause, he finally spoke, carefully choosing his words. What he told me didn't come out like gossip or rumor. It sounded certain. He had learned about it from someone connected to my family's circle. That night, while I was fighting to stay conscious, they were sitting at a restaurant, laughing, celebrating my brother's achievement. Music, food, photos, everything normal for them. He said my phone kept lighting up on the table at one point. Not just once. Multiple times. They all saw it. No one moved to answer. My name appeared again and again, but it didn't change anything for them. The attention stayed on the celebration, not on me. Then he added something he seemed hesitant to repeat. My mother had glanced at the screen and brushed it off, saying I was probably exaggerating again, that I always made things bigger than they were. After that, the phone was left untouched. I didn't speak for a while. I just sat there, trying to process how casually it had all been handled. It wasn't confusion or misunderstanding. It was choice. Every missed call had been a decision. Cade didn't push me to react. He just stayed quiet, giving me space to think. But inside, something shifted. The pieces that never made sense before suddenly fit together too clearly. It wasn't about being ignored in a moment of distraction. It was about being ignored even when they knew I needed them. And that realization changed how I saw everything that came before it. I sat there for a long time after hearing it, not saying a word. It didn't feel like shock anymore. It felt like everything inside me just slowed down at once. The more I replayed it in my mind, the clearer it became, and that clarity hurt in a different way. I kept thinking about all the times I had made excuses for them, all the moments I told myself they were just busy or distracted. None of that made sense now. There had been space to respond, space to check, space to care, and they had simply not taken it. My chest felt heavy, but not from fear this time. It was something deeper, like something in me had quietly shut off. I stared at the wall, trying to feel angry or sad, but even those emotions didn't come the way they used to. Everything felt muted. Kate stayed nearby, but I didn't talk much. I couldn't find the energy for it. I nodded when needed, answered softly when spoken to, but most of the time I just stayed still. My thoughts were moving, but my reactions weren't following. I realized I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. No apology felt real enough. No explanation would change what already happened. It wasn't confusion anymore, it was acceptance in a way I didn't want. Something inside me had changed direction. I couldn't call it heartbreak the way people usually do. It was more like distance growing between me and everything I once hoped for. The version of me that kept hoping for them felt far away now. For the first time, I didn't feel like I needed answers from them. I just felt done asking. After everything settled, I had time to think clearly for the first time in a while. I stopped reacting and started paying attention to details I had ignored before. Paperwork, accounts, old agreements, things I had helped with years ago without fully understanding their importance. Back then, I signed what I was told to sign, trusting it was just routine. I never questioned it because I believed family wouldn't put me in a position where it could be used against me. But now I could see how those same decisions had quietly tied me to their financial mess. What they didn't realize was how much responsibility had been shifted onto me over time. I had been covering payments in the background for a while, keeping things from falling apart without ever being acknowledged for it. It wasn't something I talked about or even thought about as control. It just became part of what I did. But sitting there in the hospital, everything looked different. I asked for copies of documents, went through them carefully, and started to understand the structure of it all. The more I read, the more I saw that I had more authority than they had ever admitted. No one had expected me to question it. No one had thought I would look closer. That worked in my favor now. I didn't make any sudden moves. I stayed calm, gathered information, and made sure I understood every detail before acting. It wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about clarity. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to what they had done. I was preparing for what I could do next, quietly and without announcing anything to anyone. 2 weeks passed in a strange kind of calm. I didn't announce anything. I didn't argue or warn anyone. I just stepped back from the support I had been quietly giving for a long time. At first, nothing seemed different. Life kept moving the same way on their side, or at least that's what I assumed. But underneath it, the structure was already unstable. The systems I had been covering for were no longer being supported the way they used to be. I didn't feel angry when I made the final decision. It was more like closing a door I had left open for too long. I reviewed everything one last time, made sure there were no loose ends tied to my name, and then I let go of it. Not long after that, things started to shift. Small issues turned into bigger problems. Payments didn't clear the way they used to. People started asking questions they weren't prepared for. The confidence they once had in everything began to fade quickly. Then the calls started. My phone lit up with names I hadn't seen in a while. First one, then another, then many more. Messages came in, short at first, then longer, more urgent. The same people who had stayed silent when I needed them were now trying hard to reach me. I didn't rush to respond. I looked at the screen without emotion, letting it ring out more than once. It felt different now, like the roles had quietly shifted without any announcement. For once, I wasn't the one waiting for a reply. I didn't answer right away. I let the phone ring a few times before picking up, already knowing what the tone on the other side would be like. When I finally spoke, there was a mix of urgency and confusion in her voice. She didn't ask how I was at first. She went straight into questions about what was happening, as if the situation had appeared out of nowhere. Her words were rushed, almost shaking, like she couldn't believe the changes that had taken place. I stayed quiet for a moment, listening without interrupting. It felt strange hearing that level of panic from someone who had once brushed off my messages so easily. There was no warmth in her voice, only concern about the outcome, not the reason behind it. When I finally responded, I kept my tone steady. I didn't raise my voice or let emotion take over. I reminded her of that night, briefly, without adding anything extra. There was no need to repeat every detail. The memory itself was enough. There was silence on the line after that. Not the kind that comes from shock, but the kind that comes when someone realizes there is nothing left to argue against. She tried to say something else, but I didn't let the conversation stretch further. I had already said what needed to be said, and I wasn't interested in going in circles. The pattern had been clear for a long time, even if no one wanted to admit it. I ended the call shortly after. Not out of anger, but because there was no reason to continue. For once, I wasn't trying to be heard or understood. I had already reached a point where neither of those things mattered anymore. I didn't return after that. There was nothing pulling me back anymore, nothing I needed to prove or fix. My life slowly started to feel lighter once I stopped trying to fit into a place where I was never truly seen. Things became simpler over time. I focused on rebuilding myself in small ways, sleeping better, eating without stress, and planning days without waiting for anyone's approval. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet progress, step by step. Cade remained part of my life, but not in any overwhelming way. He didn't try to take credit for what happened or turn it into something bigger than it was. He just stayed consistent. Sometimes he checked in, sometimes we talked about normal things, nothing heavy. It felt natural, not forced. Being around someone like that made me notice how different real support feels. There was no confusion, no guessing, no waiting for the bare minimum. Just simple presence when it mattered. I stopped measuring my worth through people who were never truly invested in me. That shift didn't happen overnight, but once it settled in, I felt clearer about everything around me. The need for validation faded slowly, replaced by a stronger sense of direction. Looking back, I don't feel the same hurt I once carried. It's more like distance now. The past doesn't pull me in the same way anymore. What I understand now is simple. Blood alone doesn't make people care, and silence doesn't mean love. Real connection is shown through action, not promises. For the first time, I stopped chasing people who didn't choose me and started paying attention to the ones who actually showed up. That changed everything about how I see my life moving forward.